Hi, I'm Cliff, and this is my garage. Today we're going to start on a major upgrade to the brakes on the Cayman. Hey, welcome back to the garage. And if this is your first time joining me, thanks for dropping by. Now, as my regular viewers know, speaking of regular viewers, please go down there, find that big shiny red subscribe button and give it a click. Subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out in terms of growing the channel, letting YouTube know that you're enjoying the content here, and also helps me to be able to produce more content. Now, we are at like 4,500 subscribers. I really want to get to 5,000 by the end of the year. We're well on pace, and I just need your help. So, and while you're at it, while you're down there clicking on that big red shiny subscribe button, click that thumbs up button. Let YouTube know that you like this video specifically. Okay, now back to what I was saying. As my regular viewers know, I've been getting heavily into high performance driver education, or HPDE, or as most people who do it refer to it, just simply DE. And I've been progressing up the ranks of driver classifications, learning so much about how to drive my car well. And this last session at Sebring, well, I made progress, but I ran into some issues. And so basically, at the end of the weekend, my instructor told me that what was holding me back was my brakes. Also, to a certain extent, my tires, but mainly my brakes. Now, a big part of that problem was actually Porsche's fault. And I mean my local Porsche dealership. Uh, I took my Cayman into the Porsche dealership for its pre-track inspection, or its technical inspection, which is required for all PCA sponsored events, and where they go through the entire car and check it out. And if you want to know more about that, I'll give you a link up here in this corner to the video I did about what the technical inspection is and how they do it and all that good stuff. Well, on this particular technical inspection, the tech said, well, he thought the brakes were kind of soft and it needed a brake fluid flush. Okay, that didn't really make any sense because A, I had just completely flushed and replaced the brake fluid just a few months before, and the car had been in for a pre-track inspection 3 times since then, and no one ever said anything about soft brakes. So I don't know where he's coming up with this, but honestly, I was kind of in between a rock and a hard place. There was less than a week till I had to leave to go to the DE, and just circumstances, I didn't have time to do another brake fluid flush and spend another 2 hours driving down to Jacksonville and back to have them do another tech inspection. And quite honestly, I wasn't sure that it would pass because I didn't see how the brake fluid flush was going to fix anything. So I ended up saying, okay, do a brake fluid flush. Cost me $400, which is ridiculous for a job that I could do myself in less than an hour and for about $75 worth of brake fluid. So regardless, they had me. I had to do it. So they did the brake fluid flush. They said, okay, the pedal feels okay now, whatever. But, and here's the part that really irks me. I was in for a pre-track technical inspection. Seems to me the logical thought is, oh, he's going to be taking this out onto the track. And in my foolish naivete, I assumed that since they knew I was going out on the track, they would install, or they would flush it and replace the fluid with a track grade fluid, a high temperature fluid like Motul 600, or as I was using, was already in the car, Castrol SRF, which is a great brake fluid for the track. No, apparently what they put in was stock street fluid, because within just a few laps at Sebring, I began to experience brake fade. The pedal was getting soft. It was traveling way too far to the floor. And at a couple of points, I actually lost my brakes entirely. The pedal went all the way to the floor. I had no brakes, came very frighteningly close to rear-ending a Porsche GT2. Yeah, not in fact, I've already made other arrangements. Porsche is no longer going to be doing my pre-track inspections. I've found another mechanic that is qualified and will do it, which is honestly, all right, let's editorialize here. I know they don't know me, but I know this car better than anybody else. I am perfectly capable of doing the pre-track inspection, but I am not an ASE certified mechanic. So I found another ASE certified mechanic who is familiar enough with Porsches. He can do the very simple. That pre-tech inspection is not complex. Okay, you don't need a Porsche specialist to do it. Regardless, okay, all right, let me get off my soapbox. Let's go on with the brake upgrade. So I am going to be upgrading the brakes in order to improve my performance on the track. Now, what I'm going to do is, of course, first off, I'm going to be doing a brake fluid flush. And if you want to know how to do that, I've got a video on how to do a brake fluid flush. I'll give you the link up there in that corner. And beyond that, though, one issue I experienced while at the track was a lot of pad wear. I had been using the stock Techstar pads that come on the Cayman. I mean, that's the regular stock street pads, and they were perfectly fine. I put brand new Techstar pads on the Cayman before I went to Sebring for the first time, and those pads lasted the entire weekend at Sebring, and then the entire weekend at Carolina Motorsports Park. So we're talking around 18, 20 to 30 minute sessions on the track, and the pads were only about 2/3 worn. They're a 12 millimeter pad when they start, and there was around 4 to 5 millimeters left when I swapped them out and put the brand new pads on before this most recent weekend at Sebring. So I went into this last weekend at Sebring with brand new Techstar pads, and I burned through those front pads all the way down to the metal in just 5 sessions. So I had gotten 18 sessions out of the other pads, and now the front pads were gone in just 5, and that was because of the new driving techniques I was learning, which involved a lot more stress on the pad. So I don't want to be burning through pads that quick. In order to improve my pad life, I'm going to be going from the stock Techstar street pads to these Pagid pads that are using the RSL1 compound. This is an endurance racing pad. Very expensive. Now, a set of Techstar pads runs around $160 a set. These Pagid pads run around $700 a set. So we're talking more than 4 times as much. But not only are these supposed to last a really long time, and hopefully, since they cost over 4 times as much, they will last more than 4 times as long. But the biggest thing is that this is a big performance improvement over the stock pads. These pads will give you a much stronger initial bite and also greatly increased friction. And so I'll get a lot more stopping power out of these pads than I was able to generate on the stock pads. In addition to upgrading the pads, I'm also going to upgrade the rotors for a couple of reasons. One is that these front rotors are approaching their wear limit. Now, do not listen to the people who tell you you have to change out the rotors every time you change out the brake pads. That is crazy. I mean, seriously, my other Cayman is approaching like 85,000 miles and is still running on the original rotors and has gone through multiple brake pad changes. So no, you do not need to change the rotors every time you change the pads. Now, in my case, I'm using the rotors quite hard in the by tracking the car in the HPDE events, and so I'm approaching the wear limit. I believe, okay, if I recall correctly, the wear limit on the front rotors is 26 millimeters, and I'm at like 26.9 millimeters. So it's definitely time to change out the front rotors. The rear rotors still have quite a lot of life left in them, but I'm going to go ahead and change those anyway, just for an improvement in the performance of the rotor itself. I decided to go with these slotted and coated rotors from Sebro. Now, I got these from FCP Euro, great company, highly recommend them. And what's really nice is that these and anything that you buy from FCP Euro comes with a lifetime warranty. So when these wear out, I can simply buy a new set and then send these old ones back for a full refund. Now, keep in mind that shipping a full set of rotors right now by UPS is around $70. But for a $70 charge to ship them back, that's going to be far less than $500 for a full set. So check them out, FCP Euro. I'll give you a link in the video description below. Now, you may be asking, why did I go with a slotted rotor versus the typical cross-drilled rotor? And the reason is that a slotted rotor is going to give you better performance on the track, which may be a bit confusing because people generally associate a cross-drilled rotor with high performance. And the reason for that is that at one time that was true. The reason for the cross-drilled rotors, people think often, is for cooling. That's to help cool the brakes off. And that is very much not true. The original reason for cross-drilling the rotors is because of outgassing from the brake pads when they get hot. They actually emit gases, and that gas can get trapped in between the pad and the rotor, reducing your friction. Now, the reason that they cross-drilled the rotors originally was to give that gas an escape route to get away from the pad. However, for, I don't know, a couple, 3 decades, but quite a while now, the brake pads that people use don't do that anymore. The old asbestos-based brake pads we don't use them. And so there is no significant outgassing from pads when they get hot that would require you to have cross-drilled rotors. Today, there are 2 reasons why cars come with cross-drilled rotors. One, the less important reason, is to improve braking in wet conditions, because it gives a place for the water to escape to. But that's really the minor consideration. The major reason that many cars come with cross-drilled rotors is simply for looks, because people associate them from their long-time use in motorsports because of the outgassing issue. And so these are viewed as cool, high performance, and so they are strictly an aesthetic choice for most cars. Now, there is one other small reason for having cross-drilled rotors, and that is to provide a very minor scraping effect on the pad to get rid of worn pad material. But on the slotted rotors, that's the job of the slots. The slots are there to evacuate any debris, any minor outgassing that occurs. So anything that the cross-drilled rotors do, the slots take care of the same job, except for the wet braking. The wet braking is not as good on a slotted rotor as it is on a cross-drilled rotor, but the difference is fairly minor and not something I'm going to worry about for track use. Another reason for the superiority of the slotted rotor versus the cross-drilled is heat management. That is that the cross-drilled rotor simply has less mass to absorb and transmit heat away from the pads. So in terms of heat management, the the slotted rotors are going to be superior just because they have more mass. And another small consideration is that the slotted rotors are better at simply generating more braking torque because there's more friction area. If you look here, there's simply a lot more surface area on a slotted rotor versus a cross-drilled rotor. So in virtually every circumstance, the slotted rotor is the superior choice, and that's why I'm going with them. One other disadvantage I should mention about cross-drilled rotors is the propensity for these holes to act as like stress concentrators during the rapid heating and cooling cycle of on-track brake use. And what happens is that you begin developing little stress fractures that radiate out from the holes. And I'm not sure if it's coming across in the camera, but there are a lot of holes on these old rotors that I'm taking off that are already showing signs of developing those stress cracks. This is just a couple of them I found, and I marked them. And again, it's just in the beginning phases, but it wouldn't be too much longer before these cracks became much more pronounced. And a little bit of cracking is okay, but the problem is when they begin to go from hole to hole, or even worse, when they go from the hole to the outside edge of the rotor. And at that point, you really need to just stop and replace the rotor if you begin developing cracking to that point. Just something to keep in mind. It's just another disadvantage of the cross-drilled rotors. Another upgrade that's going into the braking system is braided stainless steel brake lines. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that regular brake lines here, the flexible portion that goes between the hard brake line on the car and the caliper itself, is that a regular brake line is made of rubber, which means that when it gets hot, it tends to get soft and can actually bulge under braking pressure and give you a soft feel to the pedal and reduce some of your braking efficiency. Now, the braided stainless steel line, of course, isn't susceptible to that, or is very minorly susceptible to it, far less than the rubber line. Another reason for the stainless steel line is that they're far less susceptible to being cut by debris being kicked up by another car. So that's the reason that a lot of track cars will run stainless steel brake lines. Now, why don't manufacturers use stainless steel brake lines from the beginning? Well, stainless steel brake lines are not quite as flexible as rubber lines, especially when it comes to torquing like this. And so they're more fragile and more susceptible to cracking and breaking down long term. So if you go with stainless steel brake lines, this is something that needs to be on your regular checklist of things to check out and make sure that you're not developing problems. But in terms of the track, this is definitely the way to go. The stock brakes on the Cayman are really pretty good. I mean, they are the best brakes I've ever seen on a car that I own. But that doesn't mean that they're perfect, nor are they the ultimate braking solution, nor are they like super appropriate for the track. And one of the criticisms of the Cayman braking system is the pedal throw and the feel and the modulation. So basically, a lot of people say that they don't like the Cayman brakes because the pedal takes a long time to develop full braking pressure in terms of the amount of movement that you need to make. Also, when you get down there to that ultimate pressure, the feel of it, knowing where you are in terms of braking pressure, and the ability to modulate or control the exact amount of braking pressure so that you're right up there to the point of locking up those tires, but you can feel that and you can feather it off to stay at that ultimate braking point, which is where you're generating the maximum amount of stopping power. Now, to help correct that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a master cylinder out of a 911 GT3. I don't have personal experience with this, but everything I've read says that it greatly increases greatly decreases the pedal throw. It also greatly increases your feel and your modulation ability over the already good stock Cayman brake system. But so for about $300, I'm willing to take the chance, although I don't think it's much of a chance, to improve the braking on the Cayman. I'm in a bit of a weird spot time-wise. I have an event that I'd like to go to tomorrow with the Cayman, and then I have to take the Cayman into my new mechanic to do the pre-track inspection in a couple of days. So I don't want to get into a position where the brakes are not functional and I can't do those two things. So today, all I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the rotors and I'm going to replace the brake pads, which are a very simple, straightforward job and don't involve opening up the hydraulic system. Then later this week, I'll take and I'll replace the brake lines. I'll put in the new GT3 master cylinder, and then I'll finish up with the full brake fluid flush to get that other nasty stuff that Porsche put in and put in my new, or put back in the very good Castrol SRF brake fluid. So today, just pads and rotors, pretty straightforward. In addition to all that stuff, when I pulled the brake pads out of the rotors, I discovered that, as is typical these days, I had melted part of the brake system. Specifically, I had melted the dust covers or the dust boots on the calipers. And so I've ordered some high temperature dust boots, actually a full high temp rebuild kit. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put the dust boots on for now in order to get ready for Sebring. And then later on, I'm going to do a full rebuild. I'm going to pull the caliper pistons out, clean them up, put in new interior seals, and then put those new dust boots back on. And I should be good to go from then on. But that's just not something I want to get into right now. It'll be a little bit later that I do that. So let's get started. Now, with the brakes, many people will completely remove the caliper in order to change out the pads. I don't do that. If you want to see my exact method for replacing the brake pads on the Cayman, once again, I'll give you a link up here in this corner and it'll show you how I do it, just removing the pads out the back of the caliper. The other models of Porsche have a bar across there on the caliper that you can't do that. And on those models, you do have to completely remove the caliper in order to change the pads. It's not a majorly difficult job, but it does add a step that it's not necessary on the Cayman. However, in this case, since we need to remove the rotor in order to replace it, I do have to remove the brake caliper, or at least unhook it from the car. So swapping out the rotors requires us to remove the brake caliper, and the brake caliper, you can completely remove it by breaking it loose from the brake line, but that's not really necessary for what we're going to do today. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take and remove the two T55 bolts that are holding the caliper to the wheel carrier, and then I'm going to break loose this bracket that holds the junction point between the flexible brake line and the hard line that goes into the caliper. Now, we don't want to leave this hanging off the flexible brake line. It might be okay, but it might not, and there's no real point in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I just grabbed a piece of electric wire that I've got laying around, and I'm going to take and loop it around the coil spring up in the top of the wheel well, and then run it through here and just create a hanger for it. Just come up here to the coil spring, and I'm going to loop this around a couple times just to get a good sturdy brace. And let's see, let's come in this way. Just lined up here. And same thing, come real tight on here so that it doesn't droop. And just coil this around, and that should work pretty well. And I just realized I forgot to put my gloves on. I'll be right back. Okay, much better. Now, if you've been watching this channel any time at all, you know that I absolutely love these Pug work gloves. They have a nice rubberized coating on the palm. The backs are ventilated, so they're still comfortable. You don't sweat to death inside of them. They fit snugly. You keep a good sense of feel through them because they're fairly thin, but they're still rugged and tough. They last a long time, and best part is they cost like $1.25 a pair. So it's the ridiculous bargain. I'll give you a link to them down in the video description below on Amazon. Great work gloves. The only thing is that if you're doing something wet like an oil change, then you want to go to something. I have some orange nitrile gloves that I really love for that kind of work. I'll give you a link to those also. Great work gloves. Okay, so we've got ourselves tied off here. Let's see. Let's start off. 10mm bolt holds this bracket on. Look, start by taking that loose. Now we'll get a breaker bar and a 55mm or T55 Torx bit socket and just, okay, break these loose. Come on. There we go. Come on. Well, finding the socket. Oh, this is ridiculous. There. Okay. Those are loose now. Swap back to my impact driver. Great impact driver. I've been using this for 2-3 years now. This is a DeWalt 20-volt max system. Absolutely fantastic. And we will remove, oops, wrong way. Set impact driver aside, and now we'll remove the bolt. And very carefully wiggle this off here and move this over to hang here. Try very hard not to bend that hard line between the junction and the caliper. All right, there we go. We're in good shape now. To get access to this, I'm going to go turn this and square this up so we can get at this caliper or this rotor a little better. What really holds the rotors on is the wheel bolts. Going through here, they pull the wheel against this, and that's what really holds this the rotor on. But when it's off, that's what keeps the rotor in position is 2 small screws with Phillips heads. And you notice that they are not directly across from each other. They're centered up between the holes. So that also gives you a definite position these things go to. Now you can get in here and try and get these things out with a screwdriver, or you could try using an impact wrench or an impact gun. But this is a Phillips head. I'm almost nervous about a Phillips head that's in a position where it's gone through a lot of heat cycles. There may be a lot of corrosion. So instead what I want to use is I want to use an impact screw remover. Forget the exact name of this thing. But basically, you take this thing, you get it in position, and you whack it with a hammer, and it turns a little bit. And that combination of the turning motion and the impact in will keep it from camming out of the head and tearing the head up. Now these things can be a little confusing because there's like a left and right marker here. You probably cannot see it, but it can be confusing because you push this in and it turns back and forth. You turn it one way for right, one way for left. You know, left or right. Now it's a little confusing because the markings are on the bit part, but it's really talking about which way you move the barrel. So if I want to go left to remove it, I need to push it and turn the handle to the left. When you're tightening something up, you'd push it and turn it to the right. So let's put it back to the left, and now we're in position to loosen up those bolts. You can just use a regular hammer. I'm going to be using this little mini sledge. Wind this up, get it in position, and just be careful. Don't wallop your hand. And that loosened it up. And it's coming right out. All right, so let's line this up. Move my light out of the way, since it's got knocked out of position by that previous hit. And once again, line it up, wallop it, and it comes right loose. Very easy. Because that's a screw you definitely don't want to tear the head up and have problems removing it. All right, now, this brake rotor should come right off, except, of course, it doesn't. We've got corrosion in there. So we probably need to get in here and just start tapping. There it comes. All right. One removed brake rotor. Take a minute to just kind of clean stuff up here. Everything looks good. So let's put our new rotor on. So looking here, we've got a couple of tapped hole or threaded holes here. I honestly don't know what those are for. The two that we're interested in are these two here that just have a recess. And so we find those and we just line them up and put those screws back in. This would probably be a whole lot easier as a two-person job. There, got it going. All right, we have now replaced our rotors. Okay, let's turn this back around and get this brake rotor back on. One thing I forgot to mention is that be sure you're aware of which side you're putting these on. You probably saw it in the earlier clips. These brake rotors are definite left and right sides. And you can see it's because of the vanes here inside. This needs to rotate in this direction so that those vanes can pull air out from the center hub and cool the disc brake. Now, if you're going in the opposite direction, it kind of would be grabbing the air like a scoop, but that would not be nearly as efficient as this system, which uses like a vaning and the centrifugal force to throw the air outwards from the rim. So make sure you get the left and the right ones. The left one on the left side and the right one on the right side. One other thing to be careful of is that these rotors, and probably all rotors, ship with a protective coating on them that you need to clean off, typically with something like acetone or brake cleaner, and that those can remove these marks, these labels on there. So be very careful of that. If you find that you've wiped out the marking, immediately go back with a permanent marker and put an L or an R somewhere on this rotor so that you don't get them confused. Although, honestly, and I can't really turn the thing correctly, the vein, I mean, the slots in the rotors go in the same direction. So they should be, when you're looking at it, should be curving toward the back of the car. Okay, so let's put this caliper back on, and just a general note, be very careful putting the fasteners back in, because you're putting fasteners into holes that are drilled and tapped in aluminum. This wheel carrier, I presume this is aluminum, not magnesium. Whatever it is, it's soft, and you need to not over torque it, because you're going to strip the hole out, and now you have a very expensive repair bill. So be very careful of that. I'm going to put this up here and get it lined up. Excuse my big old head being in the way. Got to look down these holes and get one of them set a little bit. I'm using my impact driver just to do it quickly. I'm not tightening it with this. And now I'll put the other one on. Be careful you're not cross-threading also. If you get any kind of resistance putting these in, you're probably cross-threaded. Back out and try again. All right, now let's take and put in the bolt for the, what is that called? It's not a brace. My goodness, I'm having a mental breakdown here. Well, whatever it's called, I'll put a little note here when I edit the video what this stupid thing is called. Again, excuse my big old head. Get the hole lined up. Get the bolt started. Make sure it's going in smoothly and cleanly. And we're going to come back with a socket wrench and we're going to just carefully tighten these down. I'm going to check and see if there's any specific torque spec. I don't remember one. Okay, well, I'm glad I went and looked because there is a torque spec for these two bolts of 63 foot-pounds. That is definitely more than I would have felt comfortable tightening it. Okay, now there is no torque spec for this other mounting bolt back here. I would just say be careful. Let's get these brake pads in here. Now, these Pagid brake pads are extraordinarily thick. Make sure you get the brake caliper pistons as far back as you possibly can. And then they will slide in, but just barely. I mean, it is a tight fit to get those pads in. All right, so we'll just take and put the rest of the hardware back on. Again, if you want to know how to do that, refer back to my video on changing out the brake pads in a Cayman. Okay, all finished, and they look really good. Hopefully, they perform as good as they look. Now, one small difference on the backs was on this bracket right here, you have to slide, the bracket holds two different lines coming to it, and you just need to pop this one out of the slot that it's sitting in before you move the caliper to the side. And then when you put it back together, remember to pop that thing back in. So no real big deal. Other than that, the rears and the other front side were absolutely identical to the way I did it here. All told, the entire job took less than an hour. Now, it took me more than an hour because of all the rigmarole of setting things up and videoing it. But if I were to start right now and to do this whole job again, definitely less than an hour could completely knock it out. So this is not a difficult job. Your typical do-it-yourselfer can definitely do this. So if you're looking to upgrade your brakes and get better performance, or maybe you just like the looks of these rotors, whatever it is, just be assured that you can tackle this. The final step was to go through a brake pad bedding process, and you can see how the rotor has changed color here. Now, every manufacturer has their own unique bedding process. Well, not so much, different ways to go about it. And basically, it involves coming up to speed and doing some braking runs, raising the temperature of the pads. And the ultimate goal is to get what you see here, which is this discoloration. Now, this is not the metal becoming discolored. What this is the pad material, a thin layer being transferred over from the pad to the rotor. Because at high speeds, contrary to what's intuitive, your braking power doesn't come from friction. It actually comes from adhesion, which is this pad material kind of sticking to the pad material on the pad itself. So you want to get this process right and make sure you get a nice, thin, even layer of pad material transferred over to the rotor. Now, before you go, please go down there, find that thumbs up button, give me a like on the video, let YouTube know that you enjoyed this and found it valuable. That really helps with growing the channel. And while you're down there, if you're not one of my over 4,000, approaching 5,000 subscribers, go down there. As long as you're down there clicking that thumbs up button, go click on that big red subscribe button. That definitely really helps grow the channel and lets me create even more content. Now, it doesn't cost anything to become a subscriber. Joining a channel is different. This is just subscribing, letting YouTube know, hey, I'm interested in the stuff that this guy is doing. It's absolutely free. And finally, if you want to keep up with all the stuff I'm doing in the garage, including all the upgrades to the Cayman as part of Project 987.2, go find that bell icon and click on it. That turns on notifications for this channel, and that way YouTube will let you know every time that I post something new from here in Cliff's Garage. I'll see you next time.